Well, welcome back to Open to Truth, a podcast all about exploring big ideas and discovering truth together. My name's Clint.
Hi, I'm Tony. Welcome back.
And I wanted to do a quick, maybe not quick, let's see how long this goes, but a raw, uncut reaction video to the current events.
Open to Truth Reacts.
We're recording this on Friday. This took place on Wednesday. What went on at Capitol Hill. And yeah, I haven't had a ton of time. I work a full-time job and have a family, so I've been tending to those responsibilities. So not a ton of time to really sit down and think about all the implications of what happened and all that it means. But I thought it would be as I sat down this morning to kind of like prep our recording session, I'm like, nothing looms larger.
It'd be weird not to talk about it or acknowledge it.
This is what people are thinking about.
Yeah.
So I think what I want to do in this conversation is, to the best of my ability, as far as I am along in the journey of the intellectual virtues, and I have not yet arrived, but to model what I wish conversations about this topic would get to and demonstrate. So.
Yeah. Okay, so it's probably worth us recapping, at least in short. I'm sure everybody's seen some news, so we're not going to spill out the whole thing, because there's plenty of content on YouTube you can go and watch to find out exactly what happened. But it's probably worth recapping some of the events.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay.
And of course, I'm curating a little bit here. I'm not giving you a shot-for-shot action replay of what happened. And maybe I apologize if I use a wrong word to describe. You might prefer another one to describe an event, but just trying to get the basic,
the flow,
the
down.
gist of what happened. So you have a whole group of people that are Trump supporters, let's call them, and they are upset about the election being stolen from Trump. A lot of them seem to possess a belief like that there was massive voter fraud. I think that's looming large in their minds, that something about how the ballots were tallied, collected, and counted, something fraudulent happenings took place to where now Biden is the president-elect and Trump is not.
Yeah.
So they are having a rally at Capitol Hill. The decision is being made January 6th. Like, we are, I think the term is certifying the votes have been certified. The electoral votes have been certified at the state level, and now we're officially counting them at Capitol Hill. Congress is doing this.
Yeah.
So it seems like, I think in their minds, like, this is the last stand.
Yeah, it's about to become really official.
Yeah. And certainly, like, some people in the media and politicians were making this seem like this was a monumental moment.
Yep.
Trump gets up and gives a speech at this rally, reiterating that the election has been stolen from him. We're not going to give up.
We're not going to concede.
Let's march to Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And stay strong, I think was a phrase that he mentioned.
Yeah.
I think he indicated that he would lead the march.
He said he'll be down there with you.
Down there with you.
I'll be with you.
That didn't happen.
He
but
quickly went back into the White House.
But they went, and I don't feel like I have a firm grip on the exact numbers, like how many people were there.
Yeah, I guess I don't know, though.
Or how many people were like the really amped up,
agitated
Not
ones.
Every single person that was present made it into the Capitol building.
Yeah, right.
So it was a certain percentage of that. But we're, pushing down police barriers, breaking a window or multiple windows on the Capitol building, climbing walls, and people breached the Capitol building.
Yeah.
And so
I also don't know how long it was peaceful before they start. Like, I don't know if they just arrived and immediately stormed the building.
Right.
Or if they hung out there for a while and then the peaceful protest wasn't working.
Maybe those details are already out there at this moment we're recording. I haven't had time to fully look into that yet. So I'm trying to admit honesty and humility. I don't know all those details. I don't think that it would change a ton at the philosophical level how to think about this, but it's worth knowing, the exact time frame and how many people we're talking about. But we've seen some of the disturbing images of barbarian man sitting on or standing in the congressional building, and these seats of power and prestige and honor are being tainted,
it's
demeaned.
Right. It's supposed to be a very solemn or serious place, and it's clear these dudes are having a laugh, you know?
Right.
They're dressed up in costume. It feels like the abomination that causes desolation, like it's just desecrating Capitol Hill.
Like it wouldn't even have felt like that big of an extra step we're taking if they were just to take a dump on it.
Yeah, they're taking a dump on our democracy is what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
I believe one person was killed by Capitol Police.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't think there were more than that.
That's all I heard of. I know some police officers were injured, ended up in the hospital, but I think it was just that woman who was killed.
And yeah, like I would call what they did, like the people that here's what I would want to say. Once you cross the line into using vandalism or violence to communicate, now you are a rioter.
Yeah. It's criminal what you're doing.
And I don't know if that necessarily means that you're a terrorist at that point. Like, that's a different level. I think that was reached in this story. But there's like, you can be a protester, and then you start to use violence. Now you're a rioter.
They were armed too, right? So they didn't go in shooting, but they were armed, weren't they?
I don't know. They're like people inside the Capitol building. Or
yes, that's what I'm...
Like was an intruder armed with a...
That's what I want to know.
Assault weapon?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Thought they were.
But yeah, maybe.
Okay. Well, it seems important.
Yeah, I think that person should
When I think about a terrorist attack, I think you've breached a government building and with weapons brandished. You know, that's a pretty big deal if that's the case.
Yeah.
So I should
and
find
certainly
out.
like trying to cause terror to the people in the building.
Yeah.
You know, senators are taking cover and their staff. And it was horrific.
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro called it the worst day in modern American politics, or like the worst thing that's happened since 9/11. Now it's just kind of, I hadn't thought of it that way yet when I heard that. And yeah, maybe I was just kind of trying to think of what would be worse. I mean, just before we started, I mentioned maybe the Las Vegas shooting, like a ton of people died, and that was like just a lot of loss of life. So it's just kind of hard to weigh these things. But in terms of like, it was really disturbing. Seats of power being desecrated.
Even on the global stage, it's like, it's embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's partially embarrassing. It really looks like America doesn't have its act together in some way, or there's some serious discord going on, you know?
Right.
If we're reaching this stage. So,
right.
Yeah, the thing that I have found interesting about all of this is you mentioned Barbarian Man. I don't know if you saw that tweet, but so the dude who you're referencing is wearing he's wearing like a Viking helmet and whatever else. He's got tattoos or whatever. So he was also at a bunch of BLM protests and riots in Arizona earlier in the summer. And so here you have somebody, I think it's pretty clear, and I think in a crowd like that, you have some people who...
Do we know that for sure, that
I'm trusting a tweet, so by all means fact check me, tell me that's wrong. But either way, I think what you end up with in riots like these, I think you have some actors who are so agitated by the feeling like the election's stolen, whatever, they really just want to demonstrate. Then I think you have some people who are just looking for an excuse to act out. Like, I saw footage of, the media is there, people just coming up and knocking over their camera equipment, destroying all of their stuff. It's like, man, these people, that person who owns that camera has not done anything wrong to hurt you.
They're trying to document this important moment.
And all you're doing is wanting to cause chaos and damage and like get your anger out. And in that state, who knows how much of that is political agitation versus I'm upset that my wife left me and all the other personal little psychological things that could be going on to just, permission to cause chaos? Hell yeah, I'm doing this because the chances of me personally getting caught probably pretty low. I'm safe in a mob, so I can chuck a rock through a window and get some of my yah-yahs out, you know?
Right. In our last blog post, I referred to it as the Goldilocks tonic of ideology and the madness of crowds.
Oh, jeez.
Like the perfect mixture of where just being hyped up in that moment.
Yep.
I'm sure it's exhilarating.
Yeah.
Like something's really happening. It's going down.
Yep. And the because you're in this mob or this sea of people, there is a degree of anonymity there, or at least maybe feels like it. And I think it would be easy to trick yourself into thinking that you are not personally responsible for what this mob does. But and I think there's really each person in the mob is individually responsible for their own participation in it. In some ways, there's no such thing as the mob. It's a bunch of individuals acting out.
So this is a good segue to like a reaction to this that I've seen that I'd like just to talk about openly.
Yeah,
is you have a number of media figures and maybe like politicians on the left or liberal side of the aisle condemning conservatives for you are complicit in this by virtue of having elected or voted for Donald Trump in the past, or even just like being at and maybe at a lower level, like just being at the protest.
Yep.
In virtue of being there, you bear some responsibility for what happened. And I just think it's interesting you were bringing that up of just to what degree does an individual have responsibility
for somebody else's actions.
Right.
Yeah. Well, good.
Like I sit here feeling like I lean conservative.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling, and facts don't care about my feelings. I do understand that, but I don't feel very responsible for what they did to the Capitol building.
Right.
Just Clinton, you know.
Well, since you don't condone any of it.
No.
Right?
I do reject it.
Yeah. Well, we were even talking about this earlier. I wonder if it's a case of sort of the no true Scotsman thing. Like, you've got this political spectrum, the left and the right. You've got extremes on either side, and I think on both sides you've got people who, throughout this summer, BLM protests turning violent, turning into riots at times, looting, that sort of thing. And I think you've got a bunch of people on the left who are like, hey, that is not helping us at all. Like, let's not be violent.
Yeah.
And same thing now on the right. You've got people who are way off the deep end storming Capitol Hill. And is it Capitol Hill?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think you've got a large swath of conservatives who would say, we don't condone this at all. This doesn't represent how we want to conduct ourselves in this political landscape, and this isn't appropriate.
So here's some examples of that. Like, let me, because I feel like maybe what I said might have been confusing, or like trying to assuage a wound or something. I feel a very similar lack of responsibility for what Westboro Baptist Church does when they protest funerals of soldiers.
Even though you call yourself a Christian.
Right.
Yeah.
I view them as very unrepresentative of Christianity.
Yes.
And the teachings of Jesus. So I feel like I feel properly distanced from that. Like, this is clearly an extremist group. It's one little church.
Yeah.
That's doing these
that's a good analogy.
Really rough protests at funerals. So, even if like someone at that, like the average person at that protest, like that person and myself might share a value, let's say, being pro-life. I feel very unrepresented by them and their actions in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I don't feel like the things that I do or believe are responsible for that course of action. It's not one that I endorse.
Yeah.
I don't think I would ever do that.
Right. And as for, someone like Trump's level of responsibility for this, that's maybe an interesting discussion.
Another great factor
I don't think at any point he did not call for violence. He came on, made a TV appearance telling people to go home and whatnot, but at the same time said, but our election was stolen from us, but don't do violence, respect the police, etc. So on the one hand, he's not calling people to storm the building and act violently, but he has made a habit of whipping people into sort of an emotional frenzy with the claims about this election being stolen. He is sort of putting some fuel on their fire, at least there. So
absolutely bears bears moral responsibility to a degree.
To a degree.
People are calling it sedition. I don't know if I'm prepared to go that far with it.
What's sedition?
Just like conspiring to overthrow a government, essentially.
I'm glad you said that then, because the other thing was, like, I don't know if these guys had much of a plan once they got in the building. It wasn't like a foreign power coming in to take a seat of power in DC and start running the country
and install
or something.
the new regime.
It's like, we're going to get in this building and we're going to muck around and steal the podium, and then what? Then what are we doing?
Right.
I don't really know how much thought there was into it beyond
or like
that.
a coup. Was it really a coup?
Were they really trying to overthrow? I don't know. Yeah. It was more like a big statement about how unhappy we are with the system.
Mm-hmm.
Or, the theft of an election, if that's really what they believe has taken place.
Yeah.
And understandably upset. If you really believed that, if you just for a moment put on your VR headset or whatever and imagine you're living in a world where you really believe the election was stolen. Suppose the tables were turned, Trump won, and Democrats had a bunch of them really thought, boy, something shady went on in this election. Trump should not be in. Now, I don't want to say that they would go and storm the Capitol building. Who knows what they would do?
It's hard to know.
But I can at least understand.
I can easily imagine when I run that thought experiment, a similar event taking place.
And that those who are doing that sort of thing could be thinking that it's patriotic for them to do it. This is our last chance to save America, the America that we know and love, you know?
And I almost wonder, I'm not like firmly committed to this idea. It's just kind of pontificating about it. But I almost wonder, just to that point, thinking about, would this have happened if the shoe was on the other foot?
Yeah.
And I almost wondered if it was just kind of an inevitable culminative moment of this whole election cycle and the times we're in, of increasing polarization and the social media disinformation campaigns and pandemic that we're in.
It was a boiling pot. It was about to boil over.
Yeah.
You know.
And so to your point, I think what's really interesting, that's a very virtuous, intellectually virtuous activity to take part in, is to imagine, what would it really be like to believe what they believe?
Yeah.
So, wow, in that world, if I'm one of these rioters, I really think that the election was stolen from the candidate I voted for. I have no real confidence that true democracy will win in the end. And so kind of like, to hell with the system, and let's try to disturb the proceedings of the thing that's about to confirm the unduly elected official.
Yeah. It doesn't justify what they did, but it at least helps you understand.
Yeah, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
And similarly for the Black Lives Matter, like if you were rioting in that moment, you were taking on the belief that like there's systemic racism in the forms of like the police are hunting us down the streets, or I'm being like very discriminated against in job hirings and bank loans or what have you, and just all these different systems are against me. And so you phrased it really interesting a moment ago, where I think it could apply to that case as well, like just an acting out of this boiling up
pent-up frustration with the system and everything.
And so like, okay, businesses aren't hiring me because of Colorado skin.
Screw them.
Burn yours down. You know, and I think there's some symmetry in these two cases of, like I think both sides don't have all the facts together, and are Sam Harris referred to both as cults. The cult of Trumpism and the cult of wokeism.
Yeah.
And both are like our doorways to hell in a way. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And the misinformation and propaganda really that prop up both of these ideas, and they lead to violence in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think as far as implications go? I think in the same way that, like, I remember when 9/11 happened and I was 10, 11 or something. And I'm in Australia seeing this on the news about something that happened in America. So I'm already kind of removed from it. It did not strike me at first just how serious or big of a deal it was. I was kind of like, oh, a plane flew into some buildings. Doesn't that kind of happen all the time? And that's a really big deal. And I think, I mean, similar feeling of ignorance with this, where it's like, okay, I see that that's a real violation, but I don't know how big of a deal is this? What does this mean going forward? I mean, presumably the building's all cleaned up now, and I don't know how many people were thrown in jail or arrested, if any, but is it business as usual? That was unfortunate, but let's continue. Or are there lasting ripple effects from this? What do you think?
Yeah, good question. Well, I'm tempted. Maybe I was going to close with this idea, but I would like to think, and I think there's some good reasons to think, that this could be a step forward in unity. So, like, if you think about it, when's the last time, like, basically everyone agrees that this was a bad idea?
Yeah, I haven't met anybody who was like, good on them.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, very few and far between.
Yeah.
Maybe the relatives of the rioters. And even then, I bet they're really shaking their heads and embarrassed. That's an interesting thing. Like, we're all kind of, I think there's this opportunity for us to galvanize around in judgment on this event, that this is totally unacceptable. Okay, we've
almost like a wake-up call.
Yeah, like, oh boy, like, we found rock bottom, or at least like the last little handhold before you fall down there.
Yeah.
And can we all agree to, like, can we hang on here?
Yeah.
Like, and pull ourselves back up.
Let's not devolve into full anarchy.
Now, now the only hang up for this being a moment of unity, and if I could just speak freely,
you may. I'll allow it.
Is that I think a lot of us were, at least on the conservative side, were hoping that the riots in the summer would be this way.
The wake-up call, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Insofar as these are tracks on parallel roads, and I totally understand that people do not agree with that, and there are left-leaning people that think and this is partially the problem, that the race riots over the summer across many cities in America, not just one location, were justified.
Right.
Justified acts of violence. You have Chris Cuomo on CNN saying, like, I didn't read in the rules anywhere that protests had to be peaceful.
Right.
It's like, oh, so, like, a lot of people are thinking, like, that was justified what those people were doing.
Yeah.
That those people meaning the rioters.
Yes.
In the cities. And so I think some conservatives are already feeling, like, annoyed.
The double standard at play.
The double standard that this is being so hotly condemned, as it should be. Like, I agree. I think sanity in this space urges us to, let's not justify looting and violence and destruction of property.
Yeah. Like, right.
You know?
Yeah. We condemn it wherever it occurs. Can we just do that?
And I think I do think there was a missed opportunity for us to galvanize around seeing our cities burn over the summer. And, like, oh, okay, that was a handhold that we all could have held on to, and then we slipped again.
No, we're on another one.
But I think we're in this moment where everyone kind of agrees that this is not okay.
Yeah.
And they're not totally the same. I want to go back to that, and that this takes it to a new level of invading, like,
government property and whatnot.
And not even just that, but because those were defaced as well.
In the summer, you mean?
In the summer, too, like police stations and stuff. But there's
totally.
something honorific and sacred, if we can use that word, about these seats of power, and there's symbolism and meaning for all of us, and that, like,
yes,
I don't have, as an American, I feel less. My heart is less tied to the Seattle Police Department building than the Capitol building.
Here's what I wanted to say. Here's a thought that popped into my head. This felt more like an attack on America as an idea than burning of businesses and whatnot throughout. That seemed like anger that needed to be taken out somewhere. This seemed directed at, well, as much as I say that, though, again, putting myself in their shoes, they think they're saving America. Yeah. Yeah.
They think the idea of America was already
defeated or
taken away,
under attack. Yeah. That's so fascinating, man.
So it's like there's that notion of info wars.
Yeah.
I know that it's founder of that actual company is not too popular, but yeah, it feels like we're in a war of information. And like one of the main reasons that I condemn what they're doing is because I think it is based on total misinformation.
Yeah.
Like I happen to have the belief that there was a lot of fraud in the election, like a non-zero amount. Like there were mistakes in the counting and weird issues with balloting. But I kind of agree with you. I usually find myself trusting the justice system.
Right. There's a
particularly
legal
across
process.
Multiple states and multiple levels.
Yeah.
Where and you can go back and look at some of the court proceedings. Like, okay, there is this amount of evidence. And like, yeah, we should really look into battening down the hatches of future elections. Like Florida did. Florida went through this whole process, and it's pretty clean and smooth down there ever since 2000, when this thing was 500 votes apart.
Right.
The national election came down to 500 votes.
That's crazy.
I shudder to think of what our world would look like right now if this election had been 500 votes apart. I mean,
yeah.
Somehow we held it together in 2000.
Yeah.
And no one burnt anything down. At least I don't think.
Yeah.
Not to my recollection. And Al Gore conceded, and there it was. Like, yep, I lost by 500 votes. Okay.
Wow. I had no idea it was that close.
Yep.
That's crazy.
I mean, ish, in that range, 560 or something.
But I'm with you. There's a legal process that's taken place. Sufficient evidence to overturn the election has not surfaced or been presented.
And that's crucial. Like, enough to overturn it. Like, yeah, you found hundreds or thousands of fraudulent instances.
Yeah.
But look, you need like tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth, I'm not in those positions to make that decision. It's worth asking, like, what's that boundary line of when overturn? I actually don't know what that percentage is. Like, if I found one crappy ballot, that's not enough to overturn it.
Yeah.
If I found 10% of the total vote was called into question, well, maybe we should.
Yeah.
It's.
But either way, that process has unfolded, and the legal system hasn't found sufficient evidence to overturn anything. But these folks, I mean, if you whip yourself into enough of a narrative, I don't think there'd be any talking some of these folks out of it.
Yeah.
Well, the legal system's corrupt. The judges are all, they've got.
What is a conspiracy theory? What is that? Is there there's probably a technical definition.
Probably is.
But I think it's something like a conspiracy theory is one whose precepts are essentially ad hoc stories to fill in gaps of missing evidence.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just add on another layer to the story that itself doesn't have evidence, but you use it to
backfill.
There's a hole in the ship that's leaking water, and you slap on another aspect of the story. But that thing has holes in it too, so you keep slapping on.
Yeah, you end up with this whole
lore. So a conspiracy theorist type of story here would be, the reason that they're not that sufficient evidence isn't surfacing is because the judges and officials are in the tank for Biden, and wouldn't allow the evidence to come through in the courtroom.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, well, and so then you have to wonder, okay, what's your evidence for that? Like, oh, it's hidden, and there's shadow cabals of figures giving money to them or threatening families. And at some point, you just have to ask yourself, like, am I in the grips of a conspiracy theory?
Yeah. And
just endorsing things without evidence because I want a different outcome, or it's fun. Yeah. Sometimes it's just fun to think of a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, yeah. You ever read that subreddit on Reddit?
No.
Mate, late at night when you're just feeling like...
What's it called?
I think it's just called conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It's just some crazy ones.
Like the pyramids were created by
That's fun to think
aliens.
about.
Like, oh, yeah, that'd be... What a twist.
That'd be so interesting. Yeah.
So that is lamentable. That it seems like a lot of people... I think to break into the Capitol building, there's some amount of that you've bought into.
There has to be, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Just given the numbers of it, like how few people did that compared to how many people voted for Trump.
Yeah, right.
68 or 70 million, whatever it is. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people were there, thousands. So pretty small amount.
Well,
anything else to cover as an initial reaction?
No, I just want to piggyback off of your thing about unity. I would hope that, because, you know, anytime something like this happens, people take to social media to spout their opinions and whatnot. And the conversations I've seen, at least on social media, have not been super unifying. And I'm just wondering if this will be the unifying moment that we hope it might be. The other thing that happened on Wednesday that maybe flew under the radar a bit more, given that most of the focus was what took place in the building, was Twitter shutting down or suspending Trump's account for, I think it was a 12-hour ban or something.
I'm not sure. Is he still off it?
No, I think he's back on now.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it was just a 12-hour suspension. And
I mean, that's a monumental
that's a big move.
Occurrence.
That's a big thing for one of these social media platforms to silence the president of the United States. That's just it's a bit of a line in the sand, or it at least communicates something about,
like, oh, that's a thing that can happen.
That's a thing that can happen now. And I think there's a really interesting discussion to be had there about free speech. These platforms, do they owe anybody free speech? I mean, they're private companies looking to make a buck. I kind of think ultimately they set their own terms of service, and they're not a public service. Like, it's not government censorship. This is a private company determining what will and won't be allowed on their platform. And I think they have the right to do that. But it is interesting that, because these things are more and more becoming like utilities that everyone uses, you know, or like social spaces. It's becoming like the town square for the nation, for the world.
So we really should be thinking carefully about when to turn off the lights for somebody.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you just never hear this talked about, which is frustrating, but for those in the philosophy circle, I mean, maybe not so much anymore now, sadly, but most people are reading John Stuart Mill, if you came up through your undergrad, and he has a pretty simple little idea about free speech that's been really popular. So you should have the liberty to speak freely unless you do one of four things. So where your speech is stoking public unrest or like bad decisions, so in the sense of yelling fire in a movie theater when it's untrue, and you've caused, when people are scrambling, and you are now liable for that speech and any damages that happen as a result of that. You just can't do that.
Which I think is what people would say Trump was essentially doing. Not that he's screaming fire in a movie theater, but he's screaming fraudulent election in the face of a lack of evidence.
So that's not quite. There's another one where there's inciting of violence. And usually how that's talked about is where the Speech Act is the straw that broke the camel's back, or it's it's very directly related to what happened. So I saw some commentators saying like it doesn't quite violate what Trump did, doesn't quite violate that, and is not technically seditious because he did not say, okay, and we're breaking down the doors of the Capitol and we're taking it over. That would have, I think, in my opinion, that would have crossed the line and now counted as unprotected speech. Because you have a rabid, frothing at the mouth mob almost. And then that's kind of the
tipping point.
If those words had not been said, this would not have happened. And it's like right at the tipping point. And maybe it might even have to do with a little bit of physical approximation that might play into it too. It makes it trickier in the digital age. Slander, you are now liable for damages that result from like intentional slander. And the other one, I forget what the exact term is, but I know it's like sometimes protected under what's called the fighting words doctrine. So to where your speech is no longer protected if it's in effect like throwing a punch with your speech.
Oh my gosh.
Like imagine,
dude, that's all of Twitter. What the heck? That's what Twitter is people throwing verbal punches at each other.
And so literally it's more like a classic case is given in a face-to-face encounter. If someone slugs you after having said something so vulgar, they might not be actually held responsible for the punch.
Really?
That's called the fighting words doctrine. There are some things so egregious that if someone screamed it in your face, you are not necessarily accountable. Like, you wouldn't be negatively accountable for having physically responded.
That one seems dangerous to me.
What you would do back would not be considered assault because they assaulted you first with a fighting word.
So, but how is that different from what we just said earlier about like, I'm not responsible for my speech offending you, like, or saying that you want to protect free speech, including not just silencing people because we disagree with them or because we are offended by what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
But if we say that I can react violently and not be held accountable because of how offended I was because of what you said, that seems really dangerous to me.
I think there's a lot of like
nuance to it,
sub statutes that go into it. Like, you can't kill the person then.
Right.
You know, like,
but thank goodness.
But like a slap or a push or even a punch, and I don't know.
Wow, that's surprising.
I know I'm pretty sure that's on the books in some places.
Yeah, right.
And like things that qualify as hate speech, like just walking up to a black person and saying the N-word.
Right.
In a way that's like aggressive.
Yeah.
And you can just imagine doing that in the most horrific way, and then a certain response
is justified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are like some 4 conditions. Those are, I think, the 4 laid out by Mill. And that's an interesting starting place. But everything else, you can let her rip. It's free speech.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty open playing ground for saying stuff, you know?
So, well, either way, it's interesting to see that there's a precedent now that's been set with silencing the president. And it will just be interesting to see what these platforms do moving forward. Like, I don't know off the top of my head. I just don't know. I would like to know. If during the summer when riots were happening, were people getting banned and suspended then for, like, posting videos or encouraging people to loot or riot or burn down buildings or whatever? That sort of...
I'm not totally sure.
I don't know if people were getting suspended for that.
The most recent one I can remember, it's just been a long year of a lot of twists and turns. You know?
Yeah.
The most recent one I do remember is Twitter suspending the account of the New York Post during the election of publishing that article about Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yes, that's right.
Like an actual news story.
Yeah.
That it looks like now is going to be they're going to hold congressional hearings about it.
Wow.
Like it's a big deal. But at the time when it was first released, it was silenced.
Yeah.
As potential Russian disinformation.
Wow. It's a tricky thing because I can imagine Twitter with good intent trying to stem the tides of, hateful content or content that's going to mislead, like trying to keep the information war under control. And we think that might be Russian information. Get rid of that, whatever. And that I can see that happening with good intentions, but there's also an underbelly or dark side to it where if they have an agenda, they can totally shape the narrative however they want by silencing whoever they want on these various platforms. So it's just as I wouldn't want to have that much power myself, you know. I don't envy being in that position.
Yeah.
Because I think you get all kinds of feedback where it's like, very obviously, silence this guy and get this off your platform and you're responsible if you don't, But it's a tricky precedent to set because then suddenly you become the arbiter of information flow for everybody.
Yeah.
What a tough spot to be in.
And there's different levels to this too that they're testing out. And one is like just banning accounts, which is like the ban hammer. That's the ultimate move kind of. But then you're also seeing probably more frequently, like the post is kind of grayed out.
It's like flagged.
And it says like, fact checked or flagged for misinformation. Click here for some details. And so that's a big responsibility of the truth arbiter. And it's not total free speech, right? Because you're
casting doubt on
before the merits of the argument have been given. You're right away met with
seeding it.
There's reasonable doubt to be had with this before you even read it.
So we'll see where that goes. I don't know. Crazy year. 6 days into 2021.
Yeah,
and there's a Viking in the Capitol building.
That's wild. We just
we just celebrated being done with 2020.
We just celebrated a wonderful new year. Yeah, man, it's tricky to know where it's going to go from here, and I know it's not looking super promising on social media, but at the very least, like what I was mentioning earlier, for the most part, like a vanishingly small number of people agree with what happened. Most of us are looking on at what happened in the Capitol as horrifying, and I think it'd be nice if there was something positive we could rally around, but at the very least, here's something, like finally we all kind of agree.
We can all agree not that.
Yeah.
That's not the way.
And so what can we do to make that not happen again? And there needs to be some concessions on both sides. I think those on the left will need to be more honest and consistent about when riots, like the outcome, like the behavior of destroying and burning, we should condemn across the board.
Yeah.
And those on the right need to be doing that as well. Like the same people that were, if you right now are finding yourself not condemning the protest, but you were condemning the race riots in the summer, then
you're a hypocrite.
You're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And you need to adjust your views accordingly. So, I am also I have the sense that President-elect Biden would not have done what Trump did, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in office at this point. As much as I'm not super excited just about him as a candidate, and some of the policies that they're purported to try to enact, I am looking forward to more like decorum and grace in the office. And seeing what we can do with that.
A little bit less of a loose cannon.
And reaching across the aisle and just getting to, like, say what you will about Trump and like the policies of the administration and what if you thought that was good for the economy before COVID and everything. It's like getting back to a time when the statesmanness of the office, I look forward to that. And I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I know what you mean.
Yeah. And
well, those are just a few thoughts we have on this past week's events. I'm certainly no expert. I'm just, on the ground trying to figure this stuff out and what it means for us. And I guess I would just want to encourage you as you go about having conversations with folks inevitably over the coming weeks about this and, other political topics. I would encourage you to try to think outside the classic two-party label, the conservative, liberal, Democrat, Republican. Like, let's see how much common ground we can find here. Like you were just saying, we can all agree not that. We don't want that. And if that's where like all the tension and division ultimately leads, we got to do something about it, So, and that starts with us individually in our conversations as we interact with people who think differently than us. So on this podcast, we're all about having honest conversations, having honest disagreement in a way that doesn't get heated. So if that's new to you, go back and check out some of our episodes on the intellectual virtues. Do we have one up? What's it called? Why Do This Podcast?
Yep. That'll have a good discussion.
Go check that one out. Why Do This Podcast?
And I think it culminates, there's a whole list of them, and it culminates in courage. Because at that point, that's when you're faced with the decision, am I going to change my beliefs on the topic after whatever.
Being confronted with new information.
And that doesn't mean like you switch to the other party. That's not where it's like. We switch to maybe this middle way, this third party, whatever that could look like. I know I'm not saying libertarian or anything, but I hope for this new thing that emerges that better captures the heart of America and the desire for sanity and a better future instead of just kind of old crusty battle lines.
Yep.
That at least for millennials, like it's just making less sense.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah. It's
the battle lines of the previous generation don't seem as gripping anymore.
Yeah,
so let's get back to some basics.
I had the thought just yesterday as I was thinking about this that I wonder if, this feels like it could be in a way birth pains, you know, like something new could be coming here that this has been the catalyst for, and it just remains to be seen. So yeah. So thanks for watching. If you want to join the conversation, if we got stuff wrong and you can help fill in the blanks for us, you can obviously leave a comment on this video, write to us at the show, openatruthpodcast.com, or reach us directly, openatruthpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you and interact with what you have to say. So thanks for watching and thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Stay curious.